I'm very glad to be here. I'm very glad that Ethiopia is hosting this very, very important conference, and I'm telling you very briefly why I think this is an important conference. The first one is the timing. This is a very interesting time for humanity. This is a time where everything that we have assumed to be true is questioned, where there are all kinds of civilizational changes that are taking place, where we cannot tell where we will be in the next 50 years or 100 years, because everything is now questioned, everything is now changing. At this time, this change, my hope is that this civilizational change is not going to catch Africans with our pants down the way we have been caught a few hundred years ago. This is time to be conscious of ourselves. In that sense, it is an opportune time for this association to take place in Ethiopia, where as a country, we have started to be extremely self-conscious. We have started to look at our past. We have started to look at our past and try to realize what our capacity is. 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, during the Aksumite civilization, Ethiopians have a civilizational presence that was as good as any, whether in the West or in the East. There are a number of African countries that have these long, powerful civilizations. In the middle, for something like 1,000 years, we have lost it. We have become simply followers of what we are given. This is a time, as Africans, to start to think carefully about what our future location would be in this emerging civilizational movement. In that sense, you have come to Ethiopia at a time when, because of this self-consciousness, we are doing quite a lot of reforms, change that's not intended in changing our country today, although that's part of it, but also anticipating what is coming and how we are supposed to prepare for this drastically changing world, to make sure that we have a place in this human enterprise, not as subjects, but as participants in its future. So in that sense, it's a very interesting time where at once there is this tremendous global change that is emerging, and the fate is not yet clear, because it can be very positive and it can be a disaster. It depends on how human society responds to this challenge. But also, while my own country, Ethiopia, is changing rapidly. A number of you probably have been here a few months or a few years ago. You can see the change that is taking place in Addis. But the change that is taking place in Ethiopia is much, much bigger than the facelift that you see when you drive around Addis Ababa. Significant reforms are taking place in areas where our future is going to be determined on. In agriculture, a significant change is taking place. In infrastructure, in energy, but equally importantly in education, because we are absolutely clear now that our future is going to be dependent on how we cultivate, educate our children. The last 4, 5, 6 years, the change in the Ethiopian education system is nothing but radical, significant. Realization that an education that cannot provide equal opportunity to all not the usual divides that we hear between urban and rural, between genders, but what we don't talk about usually, which is between class. The difference between the rich and the poor in education is probably one of the most disastrous things that could happen to Africa unless otherwise it wakes up and try to give equal opportunity to quality education to its poor community. This is what Ethiopia is embarking on. But more relevant to what this meeting is, one of the fundamental changes that we're enacting is in the area of educational assessment. Now, I'm sure you'd find it out of this world if I tell you the passing rate in our college entrance exams was reduced from something like 60% to 3% in 2020. To 3%. It was a bitter pill to swallow. We know we cannot go anywhere without returning the integrity of our educational system. And what educational assessment does is it provides that critical integrity in the educational system. Your responsibility when you do your studied presentations in the next 2 days is not just to look at all these new terminologies that are flying around in all sectors because of the dominance of certain kinds of knowledge. We need to look much, much deeper into ourselves. We should not buy into the idea of data-based assessment when we know we don't have an integrity in our data. We have to start to talk honestly about ourselves and in relation to the future of our children. Integrity in our assessment provides us with two important things. One, as I said, it would bring back integrity to our education system. It would allow us to pick the brightest students and provide them with the capacity that would help them lead our continent in the future. But at the same time, it would allow us to pick those that are not performing at that level, but that can actually contribute towards the development of the continent on a variety of ways, including in technical and vocational capacities. We should stop thinking that certain models that we have acquired is necessarily the only one that is going to take us forward. We have to start to dig deep into our past, into our civilization, into our failures, so that we can avoid the mistakes and we can benefit from the strengths of our past, our tradition, our history. That's why I take this a very important assessment coming to Ethiopia this year. It is a moment when the world is changing. It's a moment when Africa must change, must change. It cannot just simply go on the way we have done in the past. And that requires us to have an honest conversation among ourselves. And I'm really, really hoping that you'd have an honest conversation, not just simply to throw data around, but to actually honestly talk to each other about what is the future of our continent. What is it that we have to do as professionals in a certain area to improve the lot of our population that have suffered enough for the last 1,000 years or more.